All right, here we go. Lab report number 3. For those of you that have not watched 1 or 2, the whole point of the lab report is to give you thought-provoking questions and let you work through those and see how those best help you achieve your physical, financial, personal goals, whatever it may be, and just kind of give you some things to think about as you move towards a better version of yourself. Obviously, I have a larger experience in fitness. Nordic term fitness fitness is a Nordic term that basically means to knit, right? So how do you weave in all these parts of your life into one thing? And that's kind of what I wanted to get at today, is that oftentimes people try to separate their fitness from their mental health, which that's a wild term nowadays, their financial health, and basically their relationship health. And they try to separate each one of these things out like they're 4 different components to their life. Well, really, it's all intertwined. And about during COVID, I was on my phone watching an Instagram live, which I never do, but it was The Rock. Okay. And The Rock was basically just eating so many calories, I wanted to stay tuned. And he was eating some brioche French toast thing. And like, I'd seen some pictures on Instagram of him just eating like tons of pizzas and things like this. And I was just like, man, this guy's got an awesome life. And so the question I'm going to pose to you today is the same one that I posed to myself then in 2020. Okay. Can we all live the life that The Rock has? And my personal answer to this is unequivocally yes. It has to be divided into you have to put certain parameters around it, right? Is it realistic? I don't know what The Rock's net worth is. Let's just say 250 million. Okay. That's just a random, it's a lot of money. Okay. So what's the chance that you or I are going to make 250 million, right? Can it happen? It certainly can. But you don't have to have that kind of money to live the lifestyle that he has. Okay. And I'm not really a celebs type person, but when I was in high school, I watched The Rock. He was in WWE. All right. And so that was, 25 years ago. Longer. I'm an old man now. And if you look at how The Rock's life has progressed, he has definitely done more than one thing to accumulate that wealth. Okay, so we'll start there on the wealth accumulation. The Rock started in wrestling. Let me take that back. He started playing college football. Okay, we'll pick up there. Granted, he went to the University of Miami, which most people can't play football at the University of Miami, right? It's just, that's top 1% or less of high school football players, in the nation. And there, he was a backup, right? So he wasn't even a starter. He sat behind Warren Sapp. It's been pretty widely documented, but his identity was wrapped up in being a football player. He had some connections and exposure to the wrestling world via his father. And he used that to get a connection with, I want to say Jerry Lawler. Anyway, the genesis or origin story for him is that he asked him to like go meet, have coffee, have a sandwich or whatever. And they talk about, The Rock maybe trying to get into professional wrestling. And Rock doesn't even have enough money to pay for the sandwich. All he got is $7, right? And $7 is the name of his essentially holding company that now is responsible for all of his money and his wealth. And The Rock was taking his physical abilities on the football field, his athleticism and his size, and trying to parlay that into the next best thing that he could, right? So he can still use his athleticism and his size. And when you play football, to be honest, you develop somewhat of an ego in a good way. And in a setting like the University of Miami, you're going to develop a personality, right? Or you're going to be able to pick on the variety of personalities that you're surrounded with. So he used to do the next best thing. Okay, and I'll speed up here. Once he got into professional wrestling, he made a bunch of money, right? But that money wasn't necessarily what he wanted, wasn't necessarily the goal. I think as he got into it, he changed to kind of what he wanted his lifestyle to look like. And I read a great article, probably 2021-ish, in Entrepreneur Magazine, where once he kind of made it in wrestling, he actually hired his ex-wife to basically run his business development because he knew she was good at that. Okay, which to me is just amazing as a divorced guy with an ex-wife that they can have that kind of relationship. I think it's really cool. And she's the one now, she's Danny Garcia. You'll see her with the XFL things. Okay, so she starts, helping him develop what he wants to do next. Okay, so he goes from wrestling to movies. Okay, again, pretty seemingly not easy, but a transition that makes sense. Okay, I've been in wrestling, that's acting. I'm used to being in front of cameras. I'm used to being in front of people. I'll go do some movies. Okay, and then once he's doing movies, he doesn't just decide to stay in one genre that focuses on his physical characteristics, right? He moves into some other movies. I forget the names of them because they were kids' movies, but the Witch Mountain one, I think my kids watched. The other one where he's like daddy in the movies. Okay, so he makes some roles that are more kid-oriented, and then he ultimately parlays these things into Netflix series, Black Adam, Ballers. He does all kinds of movies and just runs this huge gamut of production. And then he decides that, hey, that's cool, but there's other things that I want to do. I want to use myself as a brand and parlay that into other business ventures. And then you see him move towards Under Armour first. So the Rock line of gear of Under Armour. Okay. And which again makes sense. Athletic, big, whatever. Under Armour is that brand. Okay, then he goes from that to, I might mess the steps here, but let's just pick on the big ones here. We got Zoa, which I think might be newer than Teremana. Okay, so Teremana is the tequila side, and Zoa is the energy drink side. Again, Zoa, it all falls in line, right? Big, athletic, played football, actor, active, lifting weights all the time. Here's an energy drink. And as we know, most people that train and work out, it's not what you suspect. Yes, elite level bodybuilders and things like that, they probably don't mess with alcohol consumption too much. But lo and behold, The Rock, he's doing all his hard work. He wants to have a nightcap at the end of the day. And he, of course, makes his own brand of tequila, which I have sitting in my pantry now. Okay, so he parlays into the next thing, right? And all along the way, he's staying and keeping the promises he makes to himself about his physical fitness routine. Okay, so he's still training. He's still staying in shape. He's still fulfilling a diet and supplement routine. Okay, we can just, look, The Rock's older than I am. I'm 40. And The Rock has about 60 pounds on me. And those 60 pounds of additional muscle mass, despite his genetic advantages of being Samoan, are unrealistic for a man of his age without TRT or some version of. But probably done in a healthy manner, and I assume supervised by a physician. So we're going to make that assumption here. It's not always fair. So The Rock has his workout routine, his supplement routine, his business routine. He has all these things. And as you can imagine, it is probably pretty hectic for him to keep track of all those things, right? You have commitments on the movie side, you have family commitments, you have commitments on the Zoa side, you have commitments on the tequila side, and then you have this commitment to yourself to stay in shape, to keep the guy going here, because the guy is the brand, right? So without his health and physical fitness, none of this is possible. Okay? So he has to keep that commitment. If you've followed along, he has the when he did the Under Armour deal that kind of showed his home gym, and the one that he's usually videoing from is in Texas. Okay, everything's bigger in Texas, but he's got a pretty awesome gym. But my guess, knowing that he played football, The Rock does the same workout probably every week, right? It's not complicated. It's not training with the stars. It's get in there, do some big compound movements. He has certain volume he wants to hit, certain weight. The equipment is a nice bonus, but could you do those things with dumbbells, barbells, pull-up bar? Probably, right? So we've laid out here what The Rock has created, okay? And The Rock, like many Americans, is divorced, and he has children. Okay, so can we live the life that The Rock lives? And I told you the answer for me is yes, but you have to think about it for you. Okay, and I will use my story or my pathway as a brief. I'll never compare myself to a Rock, but as an example of how you can parlay the skill set that you have into something more or something that you desire, as long as you're willing to keep promises to yourself. Okay. I'm going to pause right there and take a time out because I do the Jack Dad, Fat Dad. And I have a lot of dads that email, text, and respond on social media. And one of the themes in Jack Dad, Fat Dad is that dads have unique responsibilities. Okay. And those responsibilities are centered around taking care of family and their kids, whether it's a dual parent home or a single parent home, divorced home. And a lot of times dads, I'm not saying moms will, I'm just speaking from a dad perspective, will sacrifice everything about themselves or everything for themselves to give the kids something, right? And sometimes that something might be really inconsequential to the child. Okay, so for example, this would be a hard one, and I'll use me as this. Maybe I don't go work out that day, or maybe this is how my mindset used to be. I'm not going to go work out that day so I can be there to drive my son to practice. Okay, but realistically, my neighbor who I have a great relationship with, she can just drive him to practice and pick him up, and I can work out. Right, so I can keep the promise to myself to work out. My son's life is still fulfilled, and everybody gets what they want. Okay, so the promises that let me restate this. Back to this. Can you live the lifestyle that's reckless? Okay, what does it take? Probably not as much money as you think, and probably being very calculated on the decisions you make. All right, so I will pick up with my education at Purdue, and particularly grad school. So in graduate school, I worked for Purdue. I worked with football and wrestling, and I was also a teacher. Okay, so this was in 10, 11, and 12. And obviously there's a lot of great experiences that occurred as a professor. I got to teach quite a bit, and when you're teaching something, you got to be really engaged in depth at a certain level of the material so that you can be the expert and answer any complex question that somebody would throw at you. And then on the coaching side of it, just similar to The Rock, but if you go to a Power 5 conference school, there's a lot of diversity in it and a lot of need to develop a personality that helps you manage multiple backgrounds and diverse backgrounds that come your way. Okay, so I had those skills, okay, the people skills, those sort of things. And my attitude when I was at that role at Purdue was I'm going to learn everything. And part of that is being a researcher and a professor, and part of that is being a coach, because once you get into it and you start knowing at a pretty high level, you realize there's more things you don't know than what you do know. And so I got that like lifelong learner mentality drilled in my head. Okay. And then I also got the experience of being around high performing, successful individuals on a daily basis. This was kind of the first lab report email that I sent out, but it gave me the opportunity to be inspired by others and then to consider moving forward on a different path that maybe wasn't this traditional coaching role that I kind of was gearing myself and preparing for, right? To draw from the earlier comparison, this is like Rock entering professional wrestling, right? It's kind of like my first step here. And as I transitioned out of strength and conditioning in the Power 5 level, my options at the time seemed pretty limited because I didn't really understand anything about business. I knew that it's scary, it's hard, you lose a lot of money, you got to raise money, all these things I didn't know. But I had that commitment to learning, and I got lucky my first time raising money, right? Like, I pitched my idea 3 times. First 2 people said no, the third one said yes. Okay, and that happened within a month. I mean, it was a really quick time frame. Then I got into that initial business and was in way over my head, had to learn a whole bunch of things, and then eventually decided I wanted to transition that into something bigger, better, more focused, had a better branding to it, and that's how I ended up with LiftLab, right? So I made that step and that transition. When I got deep into LiftLab, I let not all, but I let a lot of other aspects of my life slide, right? My relationships took a hit, and my physical health took a hit. Even being a gym owner and being in the gym all day, you must just work out, is what everybody says. Is not how that works. You have to still have focus and dedicated time towards it. Training in your own gym, any gym owner will tell you this is one of the hardest things to do because people will nonstop interrupt you, right? And at the time, I looked at having a gym membership elsewhere as just a huge negative thing. Why would I have a gym membership elsewhere? Anyway, I do. I have gym membership elsewhere. I have a gym in my garage. Okay, and so I was able to refocus, and for that time around, at that stage of my life, get my house in order. Okay, and get my health in order. I got my relationships in order, and started moving towards doing the next things I wanted to do. While owning a gym, I realized I like the entrepreneurial side of the health and fitness industry. I like being a business owner, and I wanted to think about what else I could do outside of the gym that utilized some of these skills I had built and developed over the years. Okay, and that's when I got into the device industry, and used my people skills, my clinical knowledge of the human body. I'm currently in a sector that's fairly complex, and I was able to get there with all the experiences that I had. All along the way, I kept a commitment to myself to be a lifelong learner, to be as healthy and in shape as I can be, and to be there for my kids. All right. And as I've done that, it has certainly been fruitful in many ways, but it has opened up my mind even more to what the possibilities are of what I can do next, what other ventures I can get into, and what other avenues that I can go down. And one thing of note, The Rock may not have had this problem, but for people like us that aren't The Rock with 250 million, I've had a lot of ups, tons of ups. And the last couple years I experienced downs. And the entrepreneurial journey is much like that, right? Now, I had a long period before really any substantial, significant downs. And I hadn't kept tabs on my personal life. Well, I kept tabs on it, but I didn't address my personal life sooner. I maybe should have addressed it sooner so it didn't become as big a problem as it was. And then I had this huge problem to deal with that detracted from some of my entrepreneurial endeavors. All right, so then I had to take a step back, kind of tidy that part of my life up, and then continue on this path here. But most people, or I shouldn't say most people, a lot of people, there's only 20% of the entire population globally that are entrepreneurial, meaning they're not reliant on anybody else for their income. And of that population, of that 20%, I read it but I forgot, but a small portion of it was women, right? It's predominantly men, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. We won't get into that, but they will give up when it gets hard, and it's really understanding. I'm trying to keep this at 20 minutes. We're going a little over today, but they will give up when it gets hard. Okay, so The Rock, maybe he didn't experience this because his heart is different than ours, right? The Rock made a bunch of money in wrestling, right? He's like not necessarily worried about the water bill getting paid, okay? And here's what happens with your commitments to yourself when you experience negatives and you experience stress. You oftentimes don't honor your commitments and you tend to go within or shut down or not get out there as much, and that actually inhibits you getting out of the predicament that you're in. Okay? As an entrepreneur, one of the biggest problems is people don't think they should have problems, right? And if you're a stoic, there's an obstacle, and the obstacle is the way, right? Just simply boiled down, the obstacle is the way. There's a whole, Ryan Holiday's made a bunch of money, right? Just making people acknowledge their problems. The Rock may not have had those problems. You might have those problems. So when you're experiencing those problems from my personal endeavors, I would suggest that you keep the commitments to yourself. Number one is that you stick to your training regimen and exercise pretty much every day, whatever that may be. Number two, you eat a reasonably healthy diet and limit alcohol and other things that mask your ability to address the issues head on. Number three, I think you keep a commitment to yourself to talk about it with your support groups, okay? And this is not you bitching and saying, I can't catch a break, right? This is you being honest about it, talking to your people that support you, to my guys, I got this problem. I'm trying to solve it. It stressed me out so much. It's like having a hand right in front of my face. I can't see all the solutions. Can you help me see solutions? Right? That's an effective way to deal with those problems. And lastly, I would suggest that you have faith in whatever that means for you, spiritually, religiously, whatever it may be, that you have faith to continue down that path and keep moving forward. That doesn't mean that you don't stop an entrepreneurial venture. It just means that you see it for what it is, right? If you are able to do those things, there is no reason that you cannot have a Rock-esque lifestyle. Because to have a gym in your garage doesn't require much money. To get up every day at 4:30 and 5 and work out pretty much requires nothing. You can do both of those things without affecting your kid's life, right? So if I go down and live in my garage at 5 o'clock in the morning, they're sleeping. 7 o'clock comes, I'm making them breakfast and we're getting ready for school. They leave for school, work. I take a midday break to do jiu-jitsu, get black eyes like this one. Go back, work, make food for when they get home from school. Spend time with them, take them through their activities, whatever it may be. They go to bed, finish office work, i.e. planning my next steps. It's real easy to cultivate that kind of life. And of course, significant others and things like that, if they're in there, they're, side by side, you can certainly have that be an appropriate part of your life, okay? So something to think about. How can you be like The Rock? I think you can.